Hello? What day did you say it was? Did you say that today is Monday? That's right, it's Monday.
Viewers, I bid you welcome to another video. You can see here is a suitcase. A wooden suitcase from the year 1962, I imagine. Very old suitcase. Let's go ahead and open it up. You can see a very nice device inside said suitcase. Notice I said said. You can see some not perfectly circled foam. And the reason why it's not perfectly circled is because the old foam had rotted. I scraped away the remainder of the rotted foam and replaced the foam. It's being held there with double-sided tape. You can also see a very special area right here. Little clipping guys here is simply to hold this microphone in place. Hold it secure. This is a reel-to-reel tape recorder. The case can come off, of course. Here's the top. And little latches here. And pretty nice. I like that texture too. They put some kind of veneer, something in there. So here is the Victor Handcorder reel-to-reel tape recorder, model TR-461B. Here's the original mic, which I believe to be dynamic. Amberella 1B will probably recognize this mic. And a matter of fact, Amberella 1B probably has either the same model recorder or the Stenotape, which is just about identical to this recorder. So this recorder, it's not RCA Victor, as it could be misconstrued as being, because, see, it's easy for somebody, the unsuspecting person, to think, aha, it's RCA Victor, because they'll see two things. They'll see Victor, and then if that's not enough to convince you, then you see his master's voice, and you got the dog listening to the phonograph, which was a common trademark with RCA Victor, the old dog listening to the phonograph. So you think, aha, of course, RCA Victor. Now this is not an RCA Victor recorder. Mind you, this bag was just to hold the microphone. It's the Victor Company of Japan. The same company as JVC. JVC is a common household name with a lot of electronics such as camcorders and so forth. It stands for Japan Victor Company. It is the Victor Company of Japan. And the interesting thing, of course, I might be looking to the side here because I have Wikipedia pulled up, and it's the interesting thing is JVC sold their electronic products in their home market of Japan under the Victor name with the His Master's Voice logo, but used the name JVC or Nivico in the past for export due to differing ownership of His Master's Voice logo and the ownership of the Victor name from successors of the Victor Talking Machine Company. So obviously this is not the same Victor as RCA Victor or the Victor Talking Machine Company. And seeing on here that the exported machines were under the name JVC or Nivico, and seeing how this recorder here does not say JVC on it anywhere, nor does it say Nivico. I heard Nivico was with export to Europe. I believe this, well, that's one reason why I believe this is an actual Japan model, i.e. not one that was meant for export outside of Japan, but an actual Japan model, which makes it, at least in my eyes, to me, worth all the more and all the more interesting, but also when I searched, in quotes, TR-461B on the Google, through the interwebs, I came across a number of Japanese websites. One of the websites is the Phenomenal Ins page, and if you haven't seen that site, check it out because it will completely blow your mind. I'll put a link in the description. And several Japanese websites of tape recorder collectors and others, like auction sites or whatever, that had this particular model recorder. But hardly anything else but Japanese websites, which more confirms to me that this Victor name brand one was specifically a Japan sold recorder. And if that's not enough to convince you, let's pop open the battery cover, which is oddly done because most recorders, the battery cover is obvious, you know. There's a little door with maybe a little screw that holds it or something like that. But you look here and you see solid. You see hinges here. And then I saw screws here. I first got this. I'm trying taking the screws out to no avail. Finally managed to just push enough force and he pops that open just like that. Uses 4 AA's. And you can see in here, aside from the words Victor, Handcorder, and model, everything else is in Japanese. Heck, they only say UM3. They don't even bother to say AA because in Japan, they didn't use AA and so forth. As far as I know, it was UM1, UM2, UM3, etc. UM3 is the AA size. So, you can see all sorts of of course, I don't know Japanese, so I can't even begin to read this aside from I can tell that's the transistors and that's the batteries, and then the 200 milliwatts is either going to be your amplifier power or it's going to be the total power drawn by the unit itself. But I don't know which one because I don't know Japanese. But it's all in Japanese. If this was an exported machine, it wouldn't all be in Japanese. So that is more telling me that this was a Japanese or like a within Japan machine, which makes this machine all the more interesting to me because I just think that's really cool. And anyway, let's take a good look at this machine. It's a beautifully constructed machine. It's all metal, hardly a drop of plastic. Sure, the volume knob is made of plastic. Sure, the windows are plastic. Unfortunately, the meter is a little bit, the plastic to it is has some internal cracks of sorts. It was already like that when I got it. Same applies to the window here. I'm thinking that probably at some point in its past, this recorder had banged up against this inside of the suitcase, and it was like that before it was sold to me. It wasn't like shipping damaged it or anything. I'm thinking it was probably at some point in its past, the case might have been dropped or something, because if you look here, you'll see the paint is scraped away there and scraped away there, which correspond with the 2 screws here at the top of the reel tables. But if I put this all the way down and I try to push this onto that screw, I really had to go down really far. So I think at some point in this thing's past, it went wham! Like really hard, bumped. And of course the metal case of the recorder took the brunt, took it like a, took it well, but of course I'm supposing that the meter may have just slammed against the inside of the suitcase and therefore caused the cracks in it like that. If I rub my finger, I don't feel any cracks, but you can obviously tell that there's like hairline or whatever cracks in there. But you can still tell where the meter's pointing, so it's not really that big of a deal. I can still set the level just fine. And then here's the volume indicator, which just goes from 0 to 5, and is really cool because it's like a radio tuner, the way it's done, even the way it's made inside. I'll show some stuff on the inside of this recorder at the end of this presentation here, just at the end of the video, stuff I shot earlier when I was working on this recorder. But I just love the way this machine is made. It's a decent weight, lots of chrome, metal construction, very solid construction. This part's metal too. I love the freaking color scheme, the way it looks, the way it's styled. It's just neat. It's a 3.5-inch machine. One interesting thing is there's an old Sony Reel with this machine. And we're talking a really old Sony Reel. If you look at this, you'll see the Sony name there, if you can make it out, is a like late 1950s style Sony name, like how it used to look years ago. And it's a very old Sony Reel. Anyway, that's really cool. And then this is an original Victor reel here that was with the recorder. There was a quick recording on this machine which will play at the beginning of, well, I'll have played at the beginning of the video. It's in English, and it was just at the very beginning of the reel, and then the rest of it was blank. But anyway, I just love the style of this recorder. Here's the front of the recorder. Nice shiny chrome. Earphone, external input, which is an auxiliary input. Needs to be decently high level. And then the mic has a weird proprietary jack, which corresponds to this strange 4-pin connector. 2 of the pins are for the microphone, the other 2 pins are for the on-off switch. And then on the side you have a external power supply using that same weird jack. I don't have an external power supply for it. And then a record interlock. Just press that down while you're going into play mode and it will go into record. So I can just do that. And anyway, it's a really cool recorder. So let's give a demonstration of it in operation. So anyway, I really like this recorder. I do have some bad news though. Very bad news. The bad news is this recorder, although it's so beautifully made, and it's not an El Cheapo recorder, I mean it's definitely built with quality, it's capstan drive, it's definitely a good recorder, good attention to detail and everything, but I do have bad news, and that is it's DC bias. So, but it's still a great voice recorder. There is a little bit of sibilance, but it's still a great voice recorder. So we're going to go ahead and make some recordings using the original microphone here. It's 3 3/4 inches per second that we're running at right now. Let's try to see if I can show that level meter fluctuate there. You can probably make out that cracked level meter fluctuating there as I make this recording. And let's stop the recording. And then we're going to take the capstan sleeve off, and then we're going to go to 1 7/8. Or shall I say, instead of 1 7/8, shall I say 4.8 centimeters per second? And now we'll rewind and play back the recording. So we'll first go back to 3 3/4, or shall I say 9.5 centimeters per second, and okay. It's 3 3/4 inches per second that we're running it right now. Let's try to see if I can show that level meter fluctuate there. You can probably make out that cracked level meter fluctuating there as I make this recording on a JVC, or I'll just say Victor Stenotape, not Stenotape. See, the thing is the machines like this, I've seen machines that look identical to this recorder, or almost identical to it, called Stenotape, and I believe that's one of the exported versions, probably to the United States, would have been the JVC Stenotape or something like that. But this is the original Victor branded Japanese for Japan machine, which to me is much more interesting than exports. Okay, so that's 3 3/4. The level set at 3, which is a pretty good level for close range voice. And then at arm's length, I have the level set all the way up. I have to, if I speak too loud, it will overdrive, so I gotta not speak too loudly. And anyway, let's go back down on here now, and let's stop the recording. And let's back up a little bit and do our capstan sleeve here. Thankfully, this is the kind that just snaps in. You don't have to unscrew it, so it's a lot quicker. Let's stop the recording. I literally took the capstan sleeve off and then put it back on the capstan instead of the holder.
shall I say 4.8 centimeters per second. Coming out of Japan, they would have used metric. None of this imperial rubbish. 4.8 centimeters per second, running at this speed. And there, of course, is no equalization change since it's a capstan sleeve change type recorder. So, same equalization for both speeds. And lower speed with the original dynamic, I presume, dynamic microphone. It doesn't sound crystal. Dynamic microphone. And then I will rewind and play back the recording.
Of course, you can hear the difference between the blank tape and then the DC bias and also DC erase together. Background noise. Matter of fact, let's just take the mic out and we'll make a recording of silence so you can get a good example of that DC bias and DC erase together noise that you get. So you could see how the DC bias and erase adds that background noise. AC bias and AC erase, the background noise amount would be the same as the blank tape portion. Following is an example of music recording quality at 3 3/4, or shall I say 9.5 centimeters per second. Next, I'd like to demonstrate the difference between using the original microphone and then a pre-amplified Shure SM57. This is the Shure SM57 professional grade, very high quality microphone, which is a gift from Speaker Freak 95. Of course, I have to pre-amplify it first, since this recorder has a odd microphone jack. I have to use the external input instead, so I have to make it line level.
Hello, I am speaking using the Shure SM57. One of the things, of course, it has a homemade pop filter. One of the things I can do is do a Sibilants Test by saying words that have the letter S in it, and phrases such as the cliché, "She sells seashells by the seashore." I want to do the Sibilants Test to see how strong the Sibilants is with this professional grade microphone in comparison to the original microphone. Testing 1, 2, 3. The Shure SM57 dynamic microphone. Now we're comparing that to the original microphone, the original Victor dynamic microphone, or presumably dynamic. This is the S test or Sibilants test on the original Victor microphone to see the difference between this microphone and the Shure SM57 and which one sounds better. Okay? This is the end of this test, but first, before I end it, I just want to remind you again about this woman at the beach. You know, she likes to make a living by selling seashells at the seashore.
Another interesting feature about this recorder is, unlike most recorders, the line level is active even during playback, meaning this recorder will work as an external amplifier, meaning you could, in the modern day, plug your smartphone into the external input and put the machine into playback even without a tape and use the amplifier, albeit bass response is very lacking. Let's take a look at what the machine looks like without any reels on it. And oh boy, does it look cool or what? The small diameter reel tables. Oh, and also, just to say, the brakes really do an excellent job. This just has a neat look. I think Clydeside's mouth would probably start making more saliva and begin to water from this recorder. I'm sure Clydeside would love this machine. It totally looks like this machine totally looks like Clydeside material. Notice this actually moves slightly whenever I go into playback. It'll become more obvious why whenever I show video clips when I have the machine open up. Because I was doing it, this machine really only had one major thing wrong with it, and that was just the rewind wasn't working well at all because the idler wheels, you know, just needed to be cleaned and lubricated. The lubrication on it had all gummed up, and it was seizing and not wanting to turn with ease, and therefore not wanting to rewind. And the amplifier actually was working from the get-go, but the capacitors were tired, as I'll call them, i.e. they were okay, but they weren't quite as good as they should be, so I went ahead and replaced the electrolytics in this recorder to try to improve amplifier operation. And anyway, it's a very fun recorder. Kind of funny because I just kind of thought, when I saw it on eBay, I didn't, I was kind of like, I kind of want this machine, but I wasn't too wild at the time, so I just made one bid and thought, if no one else bids, I'll get it, but if somebody else bids, then whatever. And I was the only bidder, and now whenever I got the machine, I was so thrilled. Oh my gosh, I mean, I might be DC biased and all, but it is a really cool machine. I really like this recorder. I love the style, the fact that it's all metal, the way it looks, the fact that it's the original Japan version and not the exported version. This makes it all the more cool to me. I really like this tape recorder. Hope you enjoyed this video. Now on to the internal showing that I shot earlier. Oh yeah, another thing I'd like to mention is that you can actually mix mic and line. If you have the original microphone plugged in and you also have a line level source, you can mix them together when recording. Okay, I got the Victor Handcorder, JVC Handcorder reel-to-reel tape recorder. Opened up here, got the head block or the head holder off because I had to access this metal idler. It's not consistently wanting to turn with nice freedom. Well, it's easier to turn now that I took the head block off, so that's a clue. But anyway, it just needs to be lubricated and stuff because it was causing the rewind to be very sluggish and barely work at all. Although everything else works. Playback, record, friction clutch is working wonderfully. I'm impressed really for how old this recorder is. I'm impressed by the condition of the capacitors because the amplifier is actually working quite well with original caps on both recording and playback. I'm very pleased. But anyway, I just thought I'd show the inside of this recorder, especially for Clydeside, because I know he likes to see the mechanisms of these old recorders. Pinch roller would go on this post right here to go to the cap stand. The flywheel, of course, is the motor shaft is underneath the rubber on the flywheel to directly drive the flywheel that way. Then the rubber around this top part of the flywheel drives this large diameter wheel, and underneath that large diameter wheel is there's a friction clutch mechanism right here. So there's the reel table, and you got the large diameter, and the large diameter wheel keeps turning whenever you stop the take-up reel. So that's the friction clutch. And then in rewind mode, doing this with one hand is really it's really just, I had loosened the screws, I took the screws off the bottom in my effort to try to figure out how to get this thing apart. That's why this whole thing is shifting around the chassis. But I haven't took this roller out yet to clean and re-lubricate it, so that's why it's not consistently turning. But you can see this flywheel this metal idler goes between the rubber of the flywheel and the rubber of this of the supply reel here to do your rewinding function. And it has very good brakes. I'm very impressed with the brakes of this recorder. I really like this recorder. It's all metal construction. Hardly a lick of plastic anywhere to be found. It's just built really well. I love it. Even though the amplifier is working remarkably well for having old capacitors in it, I still want to check the ESR of the capacitors to see if I could improve it a little bit. Maybe make it a little bit louder than it already is. So I went ahead and I took the chassis of the recorder out of the case. And I wanted to get some footage of that circuit board because that is a very interesting looking circuit board. Very simple layout. A lot of very large printed circuits. Not too many narrow printed circuits, really. I'm surprised by the layout of this circuit board. You can see a couple electrolytics where they were big enough diameter. They had to actually have holes in the board to allow for their bigger size. Those will be some easy ones to go ahead and check at first. It looks, from what I could see, that this is uses probably all axial leaded electrolytics. Probably none that are radial. Take a good look at that old circuit board. This is before potentially replacing any caps. Although I did test 2 of them already, and they were both good. The ones that I did test. So anyway, that's just a beautiful looking circuit board. Very spaced out layout, lots of axial caps. The transistors have insulated leads going, rested down, and then the leads kind of bend down to where they go. Probably to try to get everything flat, to fit in a flat surface. It's very interesting, this layout of this circuit board. I really like the layout of this old board. And bad news, of course, is it's a DC bias recorder. You can see there's 2 transformers. One's going to be an input transformer and one's going to be an output transformer, but there's no oscillator transformer in this. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It does have 6 transistors, which is nice. A good amount of gain this amplifier should have, so that's good. 6 transistor amplifier, but unfortunately DC bias. Most of the capacitors were, well, actually all the capacitors, most of them, the needle went halfway on the ESR meter, and the 50 microfarads went a little bit more. Basically, the old capacitors were okay, around okay, but they weren't the best. And I went ahead and decided to go ahead and replace the capacitors, so you can see some new, or well, newish capacitors that are good, much better than the old ones, that have been installed into this recorder. Axial leaded makes it pretty easy to work on, and easy to grab everything, and extremely easy to test the old capacitors originally, especially. So anyway, beautiful circuit board in this old recorder. I love the spaced out layout of these older boards with the axial leaded caps. Everything's laid out. It's not all crowded and everything. It's all spaced out. It just looks very aesthetically pleasing. And okay, so we'll be putting this board back on the recorder. I think this is great for the volume control. Look at that. Isn't that just phenomenal?
This has been a Cassette Master production.